Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and welcome to this conversation on shaping the future of payments in Central Asia and beyond. I'm Charlotte Khan, I'm a journalist. I'm delighted to be hosting this session with our very special guest here today. That's Robert Thomson, Senior Vice President, Global Head of Government Engagement at Visa. Thank you so much for joining us here, Robert.
Charlotte, thank you. Thanks for being here.
So we're having an important conversation here this afternoon. I'm going to tell you why. Because this morning, President Tokayev, in his opening address, reminded us that in order to grow the economy, what's essential is to build a more diversified, a more inclusive, and importantly, a future-ready economy. And that can only happen if we further increase or improve the rate of digitalization. And it's also important because the expansion of digital payments is both a symptom and a cause of economic growth. And I'm going to share a few data points with you. Obviously, you know them, Robert, but the audience here to kickstart this conversation. Research by the Bank of International Settlement revealed that for every percentage point increase in the use of digital payments, there is a 0.10 percentage point rise in GDP growth over a 2-year period. And here in Kazakhstan, we've got a very inspiring and very encouraging case study because we've got this very fast adoption of digital payments from taxis to bazaar traders. Cashless payments have very quickly become the norm, hence the title of this session, Leapfrogging to Digital Payments. And in fact, 85% of all transactions were made digitally, according to the National Bank of Kazakhstan as of December 2024. So, Robert, to start this conversation, could you offer us your assessment of the digital payment landscape here in Kazakhstan and what's allowed this leapfrogging?
Yes, Charlotte, thank you very much. And it's just an honor to be here as part of the Astana International Forum. This is my first time in Kazakhstan, but not my first time studying in Kazakhstan. And Visa has been part of the Kazakhstan digital ecosystem for now over 30 years. And we have been really pleased to contribute to the digital transformation that's taking place. And it's really remarkable, maybe just starting from a Visa perspective, Kazakhstan is the home of our regional hub for Central Asia. And so we manage all of the region from here. It's got a wonderful talent pool, wonderful sense of innovation. That's really helped drive this leapfrogging that you referenced. Kazakhstan is also very much a connector economy. When you think about its role in the region, you think about its role in terms of the leadership in technology and digital payments, the economic drivers that you see here. And that's really important as you reflect then upon all the transformation taking place. And maybe just in addition to a few of the statistics that you referenced, Charlotte, I'd mention a couple of other ones, which I think enhance the point that you made. If you look at access to digital banking or banking accounts, you know, in Kazakhstan, about 12 years ago, it was less than 50%. Today, it's nearly 100%. The figures that you cited, the number of digital transactions that are occurring are well over 90%. And so much of that happens in the digital ecosystem with apps. These apps then are also connected to government. You know, the government technology services in the country, almost all the services, over 90% of government services, you can access electronically through these super apps connected to banks. And so you see this everywhere you go in the country. There's a digital element to it, which makes it much more accessible, makes it much more secure, and it brings more people into the economy in ways that help boost economic growth. So at Visa, we're really excited about not only the path we've traveled to get here, but also what the future looks like in terms of really building on this sustainable economic digital future.
And could you expand maybe a little bit further on what allowed this very fast adoption of digital payments? You've mentioned applications, for instance, but what created the right environment or framework for it to happen?
Yeah, there are a number of elements that you see in Kazakhstan which I think reflect best practices that other countries are looking at as well. And I'd start with, digital identification, which is really important because, in the world of payments, you need to make sure the person paying is the person you know it to be. And so this digital identity is really important. And that has allowed the government apps to very easily be connected for consumers to use, for banks to apply them. So that is certainly one piece. And governments around the world are in different phases of how they evolve and use digital identity. And that's an area where Visa is certainly focused. Another is just if you think about the connectivity required to be truly digital, when you reflect on Kazakhstan as a vast country, very much part rural, a lot of urban areas, but the government has implemented a number of policies which promote digital and mobile access, which is really essential for, fulfilling the ability to make digital transactions. So that's really important. And then when you add in the inclusive financial experience, making sure people have access to accounts, all these ingredients, all these policies encourage advancement. And then the last one I might say is just an innovation mindset. So the ability to try new things, to see what learns. There's very much a test and learn ecosystem that exists in Kazakhstan in partnership with the regulators and the government to encourage enhancement in digital.
Thank you for that. So tell us a bit more about your activities at Visa and how they're aligned generally with the development of digital financial markets here in Kazakhstan.
Yeah, and so for Visa, we've actually launched a number of firsts in Kazakhstan. I think our first card issued in the country was in 1992. More recently, just in 2023, we launched something called Request to Pay, which is a new P2P service that allows you, if we have a shared expense, you can say, Baba, you owe me the 50 tenges for the lunch that we had or whatever. But it allows much more seamless connectivity of payments that can be leveraged through banks and for consumers and small businesses and entrepreneurs. So that was one example of innovation. Another example is Kazakhstan actually has been quite a leader in its own central bank digital currency, so the digital tenge. We actually launched the first Visa card that you could transact in digital tenge, which is really an important feature. And as governments around the world are looking at their own future of central bank digital currencies, it's a model that you can use and leverage. I think the other thing that's really important from a Visa perspective, maybe two other things. One is just as the world goes more digital, of course the cyber criminals are not far behind. And so how we leverage AI, how we leverage our investments to make sure that payment systems are secure, that they're resilient, and that consumers have the necessary protections if something goes wrong. And that's where Visa is a leader, and I think we're working very closely with the regulators, with financial partners, fintechs, to make sure that the ecosystem is secure as it possibly can be.
You've mentioned AI. Who doesn't these days? It's hard to have a conversation on any topic without mentioning the disruption brought on by AI. So could you tell us a bit more about that and what it's going to change for digital payments? It's going to possibly increase, well, it's already increasing cybersecurity concerns, I guess, but there are opportunities too. So could you tell us a bit more about how you see AI and Gen AI impacting your activities generally?
Yes, and AI is something we think about every day, all day. And Visa's actually got a lot of experience with artificial intelligence, particularly from a fraud fighting perspective. So we introduced the first AI models in payments over 30 years ago to really help make sure that, when you use your card or your payment credential, it's you making that payment. And we can tell the good transactions from the bad transactions. So a lot of fraud fighting ability comes from the use of AI. And just to put a number to it, last year alone, we helped prevent 40 billion US in potential fraud through the use of AI applications. So the world that we see ahead is really going to be increasingly relied upon AI to protect and prevent fraud and combat cyber attacks. So that'd be one thing. But as you all, I'm sure, have experienced, AI is becoming an increasingly important part of our daily lives, and how we shop, how we engage in commerce is really going to be reflective of AI. And soon you'll be able to have your own agent who's shopping for you. And the world in that looks a little scary, because how do you have the controls? How do you ensure that what they're purchasing on your behalf is in fact what you want? So Visa just last month, in fact, launched something called Visa Intelligent Commerce, where we're partnering with the leading AI companies around the world to determine the frameworks for how commerce takes place in an AI-generated environment. And that means how you use your payment credentials, what controls you put on it. So you could say, for instance, I would want to approve, transactions up to a certain amount, or I want to make sure these transactions are very specific. And so to create the trust around commerce. And that's where Visa as a payment network really comes into play, because as much as we're in the payments business, we're very much in the trust business, so that when you use your Visa credential, you have confidence that it's going to be secure, you can make the payment, and you have confidence that it'll go through.
trust, the greatest currency, I guess, in digital markets, digital financial markets in particular. In my introduction, I mentioned the fact that further digitalizing the economy was obviously a vector of growth. But there's another very important aspect of growth, and it's social growth, actually, that you alluded to. You talked about inclusive financial markets and digitalization. That's a very important point indeed. So could you tell us more about that and the benefits of financial inclusion, especially for the region here in Kazakhstan and beyond?
Yes, thank you. And Visa is all about uplifting everyone everywhere. It's part of our mission as a company, and we're only as successful as our ability to serve all consumers wherever they may be, in whatever country they may be. And so financial inclusion is just a core part of our company's history, going back to the very founding of Visa in 1958. And that's important too in emerging economies and growing economies, because you want to make sure that everyone has equal access to digital payments. And just to maybe give you a contrast, I referenced before, in Kazakhstan, the vast majority of individuals have access to a bank account. That's not true everywhere in the world. If you think about the global trends, over nearly 1.4 billion people on the planet don't have access to digital payments, don't have access to financial accounts, don't have access to the same technology. And so Visa is working to change that. We're working with partners, and this isn't something that we're just doing on our own. It's something we do in partnership with governments, with financial institutions, with fintech partners, to make sure that the digital payment ecosystem is inclusive and has access. And so we spend a lot of time on financial education programs, supporting entrepreneurs, helping to do curriculum to make sure people are comfortable when they do have access to digital payments, and making sure, of course, that there's a security, because once you start, and if you lose that trust, you're just simply not going to go back. And so from the very day one, we want to make sure that the system is as secure as it can be. So all these things go together to make sure that there's a really robust, vibrant ecosystem that is inclusive, that encourages adoption of digital and financial services.
And still on the topic of financial inclusion and empowerment, we heard a lot this morning around women's empowerment in the remarks by some of our very distinguished guests. And it's very much a theme as well at Visa. You've got this fantastic global initiative. It's called She's Next, that you launched a couple of years ago, I believe. And it's all about supporting women who want to launch their own business. I'm seeing a lot of smiles here across the room from the ladies who know what I'm talking about here. It's getting that extra push, that extra support as a female entrepreneur to go out there and maybe borrow if you have to, and have that digital payment support. So tell us more about the initiative, and tell us more about the impact here, because I believe it's been very, very successful here in Kazakhstan.
Yes, indeed. And so maybe let me just offer a couple of observations, and I'll come back to Kazakhstan specifically and the work we've done here, because it's a real success story. But maybe just stepping back, if you think about the entrepreneurship around the world, most new businesses today are started by female entrepreneurs, which is wonderful. Second thing that's a reality is, though, most female entrepreneurs lack access to capital, lack access to the skills and tools they need to succeed as they're looking to start their business. And so as a result of that, Visa launched a global program called She's Next, which is really focused on empowering entrepreneurs to help them succeed as they start a new business, as they expand a business, to give them access to expertise that really helps them grow and be successful. And so She's Next really is both, think a combination of Shark Tank, pitching opportunity, and giving support on the ground to make sure that as female entrepreneurs are building their business, they have the tools that they need to build their strategies confidently, to access the power of digital solutions and payments so they can support their business, to know how they think about their investment planning and needs over time. And so just to bring that back to the region and Kazakhstan specifically, so we launched a program a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago, and since we've launched, nearly 26,000 individual female entrepreneurs have gone through the program. We expanded it regionally, so we've been in 8 different cities across the country. And what's really amazing about it is we opened this up to applicants. Last year alone, we had, I think, over 16,000 applicants to participate. And we'll take them through a curated program to help support them, help give them knowledge, and then we'll take their ideas and have them do a pitch about the success of their program, and then there's a panel of judges that will weigh in and offer them advice and then ultimately award a winner. We've partnered with Halak Bank here in Kazakhstan, who will provide access to capital for the female entrepreneurs. Visa contributes access to capital as well. And we've done this in partnership with the Ministry of National Economy and also with the Association of Women Entrepreneurs in Kazakhstan. And so we're trying to create a community to support female entrepreneurs and help them succeed in whatever ideas that they have. And it's amazing to see the confidence flourish with the winners and even all those who participate in the program, because what you see is they take away from that, they then share with their friends and colleagues. And so there's a multiplier effect of the programs that we're doing to help them succeed, in Kazakhstan and of course beyond.
Well, that's very inspiring, because it's not just about digital payments, is it? Or payments overall. It's about creating that ecosystem, that's very supportive environment for women and other entrepreneurs, let's face it, to thrive and do very well. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. I just wanted to go back to the topic of innovation. We've mentioned AI, of course. So can you tell me more about what technologies or maybe regulations, what could be an enabler here in Kazakhstan in particular, and very pivotal to reach the, well, already great digital payment rate from 85% to 100%?
In payments and in digital, it's always a constant race to sort of continue to stay ahead, right, and introduce the newest innovations, the newest technologies, the newest solutions. And in doing it, what you want to create is an environment that encourages investment, encourages responsible risk taking, and that's in partnership with government to create the sandboxes that allow you to test and learn, to create programs and policies where there is good partnership and collaboration, and certainly in the region we see that a lot, whether we're talking Kazakhstan, whether we're talking Uzbekistan or other parts of Central Asia. But it's important as you think about things like digital public infrastructure, where there's a vested interest for the government to really promote the public interest. But making sure as they do that, it's for the public interest, and you allow for the participation and support of the private sector. Because when you have that ingredient, it's a massive unlock and accelerant. Because if it's just government-led, they're only going to be so successful. If it's just private sector-led, again, it's limited to those involved. But when you bring that together for true private sector collaboration, you see this amazing unlock, this amazing potential created, and it creates an accelerant of how you then transform the digital economy. And I think as you're looking at all the different data points in Kazakhstan in particular, we really cite that as a success story. So we reflect a lot on governments and their transformation around the world. And you hear a lot, for instance, around India and Brazil, which are very prominent in terms of the digital capabilities that they've led. Many of those are actually led by government. And Kazakhstan has been a really terrific partnership, because you see the fintechs and banks flourishing because they have access to the government tools. So I think it's a combination of these things which allow a good innovative environment, good regulation that evolves to make sure that's staying current. Because unfortunately with regulation, it often looks backwards, just by nature of what it is. And then creating really good consumer experiences where consumers have the choice to determine what products, services, and solutions that they want. And so all those, when those come together, you see the best of innovation, the best of digital transformation. And then just one last point is related to just the government solutions themselves. Government is a technology provider. Governments provide so many services to consumers and constituents. We want to make sure that stays best in class too. So all these things come together to really provide best in class digital experiences.
Thank you, Robert. You have worked very closely with the government here indeed, and the government of Kazakhstan has been a leader in building digital public infrastructure, DPI. That's the acronym for it. So can you tell us more about the governance principles that policymakers should consider when developing DPI? Because we've explained here that Kazakhstan does serve as a great case study for the rest of the region and beyond.
Yes. Yeah, and I think the elements that stand out here, I mentioned digital ID before, but that's really a fundamental element of this, because having the right digital credential allows you then to have access. Again, it builds the trust and security that you have. So that's a fundamental piece. As you think about driving internet availability, policies that promote that, because ultimately digital public infrastructure, is incumbent upon having good access to connectivity. mobile phone access, and in Kazakhstan, most individuals over the age of 15, 90% have a mobile phone, which they can easily connect, so that's important. And I think also the partnership directly with government is really essential because, for instance, here in Kazakhstan, we work closely with the National Bank into making sure that the protocols protections are in place for consumers as they take this leap into the digital world. And that's allowed them to be successful. And so as you look across all the different metrics in Kazakhstan, whether it's the number of digital transactions, which is very high, the number of people who have access to digital telephones, high, digital ID is very high. So all those become really important. We actually worked with a leading international think tank to do a comparison of how Kazakhstan compares to the rest of the world with respect to digital ID. And they're actually quite advanced. Even relative to places like India or Brazil, the percentage of digital penetration is much higher. So we think there's a lot of lessons to be gained across the region and around the world from Kazakhstan.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to closing thoughts, I was wondering if anyone in the audience had questions for our guest, if you're happy to address questions from the room. Robert?
Sure.
Any questions from the room? Yes, we have a question here.
Yes, I'm representing a society of women in business,
Oh.
and we do annual forum during the last 10 years. And I would like to thank Visa because they support a lot our women empowerment initiatives, and we are working closely on many projects, including education. And thank you for these opportunities, for Inspire, for helping us develop together with Visa. Please come to our forum. It's only in February. Christina and Levina will support. Yes, he's a great speaker.
Thank you very much. And
That's fantastic.
I would just say
Thank you so
it's
much.
a wonderful example of the power of the Visa network to really, work with constituencies, work with female entrepreneurs and leaders like you. So thank you for the partnership. We're grateful for it.
And an invitation, of course.
An invitation, yes, indeed.
Fantastic. Any more questions from the room? So, given that this session was titled The Future of Payments in Central Asia and Beyond, I'm going to ask you maybe to conclude this session to project ourselves forward 5, 10 years down the line. What do you expect the market, the digital payment market here to look like?
Well, first of all, I think we're
And
just
what are your plans, of
yes,
course?
We're just getting started, and I think that's the exciting part, right? The amount of transformation that has occurred here in a short time is really remarkable. But in the payment space broadly, there's just an acceleration happening. So what the future looks like even 3 and 5 years from now is going to be fundamentally different, right? How you pay, the credentials by which you use to pay, the role of AI that we talked about, the role of security, the role of really, being consumer-driven, consumer-specific in terms of how you interact, how you pay, putting the controls squarely in the hands of the individual in terms of what you spend, when you spend, how you spend. I think all those things are going to be really important. And frankly, as we look ahead, the world of digital assets, digital currency, all those become even more critical because that becomes, right now, I'm sure some of you use crypto on occasion, some of you maybe not at all. In the future, it's going to be very much a commonplace part of how payments work. And so we see the future as being not only very exciting, but also the role that we can play in contributing to the continued transformation is going to be ever more critical.
Exciting plans ahead. Thank you so much, Robert. Robert Thomson, who is Senior Vice President, Global Head of Government Engagement at Visa. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
And thanks to the audience as well for your attention and great points and questions. Thank you.